Hi, I'm Max Keiser, and this is the Keiser Report. You probably haven't thought much about eating plastic chickens, eating plastic eggs, or chowing down on some plastic rice. We're going to be talking about that shortly, but first, let's bring in Stacy Herbert.
Max Keiser.
Hello.
Hey, you know what? The biggest story, of course, is this revolution sweeping the world. Revolutions, the one in Egypt, of course, everybody's looking for the cause. Is it inflation and the inflation of food prices? Is it the rising inequality reflected in the Gini coefficient index? Here's some reasons that I'm going to look at. First headline, Tony Blair. Mubarak is, quote, immensely courageous and a force for good.
What?
Yes, he actually said this on the Piers Morgan show. We're not going to actually listen to his words because I just can't stand listening to him. But I'm going to say what I think he was actually saying. Mubarak is immensely courageous for looting so much money from his people so openly and brazenly, and a force for good kickbacks.
Mubarak, Obama, Tony Blair, they're good. If there's a revolution, great. We'll send in the Vodafone and the Starbucks. No revolution? Great. We'll send in some bombers and some tear gas canisters. We make money no matter what happens because we're arbitrageurs, not politicians.
But the other important thing about this is this class of global kleptocrats, of globally connected elite who plunder their own countries together. And this brings me to this next story. Egypt's Mubarak likely to retain vast wealth. Mubarak family may have as much as $70 billion stashed away. Amani Jamal, who is a professor at Princeton, said that Mubarak's assets are most likely in banks outside of Egypt, possibly in the United Kingdom and Switzerland. Mubarak, his wife, and two sons were able to also accumulate wealth through a number of business partnerships with foreigners.
Right, well, the kleptocrats that plunder together, stay together. This is the global kleptocratic class, and they are all working together. They're colluding, as Adam Smith pointed out, in any situation where capitalism is the prevailing economic model, you have naturally a propensity toward collusion, and that's why you need very stiff regulations to try to keep these guys from fixing prices. But all the regulations are not. Now, in the mid-2000s, a lot of the regulations were taken away in Egypt. It was deregulated. And this is when the wealth and income gap just skyrocketed. And it's also why the central banks and their money printing to feed the pockets of the kleptocrats have caused these huge spike in food prices. So, as you point out, it's a combination of the Gini coefficient, which measures the wealth and income gap around the world, plus the relative amount that is spent personal income on food. So in Egypt, much of the personal income goes to food, plus you have the Gini coefficient exploding equals revolution. So if you want to handicap which countries are next to pop, that's the way you do it.
Well, I have a headline here, Max. If inequality is a factor for Egypt, ... If you take a look at that little chart, this is a Gini coefficient index, which 0 is perfect equality. Everybody has exactly the equal amount. 100 is only one person owns all of the wealth of the nation. So the closer to 100 you are, the higher the number, the more unequal it is. Pakistan is 30.6, Egypt 34, Israel 39.2, Tunisia 40, and the US 45.
Yeah, the U.S. is very high on that list, which would portend insurrection and regime change. But the thing that keeps it from happening is that percentage of income toward food is still low because of the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency. So food and energy are still relatively low. This is what is keeping the wave of global insurrection at bay in a country like the U.S., but it will get there. And when it does get there, it'll be 360 degrees of global insurrection against banker occupation. And then we can hope to see a complete, total global regime change of all the corrupt bankers, including Blythe Masters over there at JP Morgan, who we'll be talking about at length in the second half. So don't go away. But tell us more.
I
tell us more. Tell us more.
Max.
Tell us more.
Okay, we're talking about the global insurrection against banker occupation. Part of the things that bankers have done is create volatility in the major agricultural products and inflation. Here the headline reads, not since Reconstruction have we seen cotton this high.
Yeah, well, that's right. The price of cotton is skyrocketing. It's at a 150-year high. Not since the Civil War and Reconstruction and the carpetbaggers. famous down there in the south of America. Has cotton been so high? And as I've been saying on this show, Stacy Herbert, before long, the number one employer occupation in America will be cotton picking. And they're going to, of course, sing those old spirituals like jump down, turn around, pick a bag of cotton, and others.
Well, another part of the reason is you see this inflation hitting China as well. Chinese take a cotton to hoarding. Apparently, farmers in China are hoarding their cotton up to 9% of the world's cotton supply. And the reason being that they are holding out for higher prices, even though they're at 150-year highs. They're aiming to help overcome higher costs of labor and fertilizer. The cost of fertilizer, for example, is up 20% in the last year. So they're not covering their costs, even with cotton at 150-year highs.
Right. Well, fertilizer, of course, is a chemical petroleum-based product, and the price of oil is skyrocketing as well. It's important to keep in mind that the reason these prices are skyrocketing is not because of increased demand on the side of the user. It's not because suddenly there's a demand for food and oil. The reason the prices are going high is the supply of cheap money that was thrown into the system after the credit crash of the 2007-2008 period. And the banks on Wall Street told the Federal Reserve, we need money to pay our yacht payments. And we can't get it because the system is frozen. Can you please give us $2 trillion? And Ben Bernanke said, okay, here's $2 trillion so the bankers on Wall Street could pay their yacht payments, but it had the perverse effect of feeding speculation in agricultural commodities and cotton to the point where it's starving people in these countries. So once again, to give you the formulation, Wall Street bankers fed starving people. Fed gives the money to the bankers who make their yacht payments, but it has the perverse effect of starving people around the world. So Wall Street bankers are starving people, like Jamie Dimon is committing murder. He's killing people.
So the starving people are not fed because of the Fed.
That's right. The Fed is causing people not to be fed.
Well, we've always talked about how inflation, it helps the rich because, of course, they own the assets into which a lot of the money goes, but also they get money for 0% from the Fed and then are able to speculate on all sorts of products.
Just quickly, think of it as a river. You know, the river flows down. So the Fed creates a flow of cash, and the people that live near the Fed, like on Wall Street, that they get the fresh water, the clean water, and if you live downstream, you get the dirty water, and that's what happens in the global financial markets.
And it increases the price of agricultural products, i.e. food. And we see that related to these headlines, these coming up, these charts actually, to show you what the difference between the revolutions happening in the Middle East and why no revolution has yet happened in Asia. So if you take a look at this wheat chart, you'll see it's rocketing. And then take a look at the rice chart, you'll see that that's not gone up nearly as much. So because rice has not gone up, the main staple of the peasant in Asia, you're not seeing as much, perhaps, yet strife.
Right, but the whole commodity complex is moving higher due to this incredible influx of money that's been directed by the bankers for the bankers at the exclusion of the rest of the global population. They're willing to commit mass genocide of the global population by increasing food prices to the extent of causing starvation just to keep that multi-$100 billion bonus pool active on Wall Street. That's the only reason this is happening. Those people are culpable in a mass homicide, mass genocide.
Well, just to show you another reason why perhaps rice isn't increasing as much, here's the headline for you, Max. China makes fake rice from plastic, Vietnam reacts. So apparently, according to a Korean language weekly Hong Kong newspaper, China is mass producing fake rice. This rice is a mix of potatoes, sweet potatoes, and plastic. It is formed by mixing the potatoes and sweet potatoes into the shape of rice grains, then adding industrial synthetic resins. Apparently, experts are advising that the synthetic resins can be very harmful if consumed. And a Chinese Restaurant Association official said that eating 3 bowls of this fake rice would be like eating 1 plastic bag.
Yes, it's like eating, plastic. Yes, that's delicious. It's completely fake rice. Of course, in China now they have the added situation, I guess you could call it, of McDonald's. half of their restaurants now going forward will be these drive-through restaurants. So presumably you'll be going through a drive-through restaurant in some highway in the middle of a ghost city in China, ordering a Big Mac made out of plastic rice and trying to drink a hot
But Max, I might
Yeah.
also point out that fake stimulus, fake money printing, fake GDP growth, fake goods and services being produced is forcing us to consume fake food.
It's fiat food.
Because we can't afford real food, because we have no real growth, we have no real economy, we have no real industry. We only have fake stuff.
I
so
get
it
it.
makes sense that we're only eating fake food.
Fake food, right. So you have fake fiat currencies.
Yeah.
And it's causing fake food because the real food now is too expensive. Nobody can afford it. Real food is they're making fake food.
And so, final headline here, Max. Iceland proves Ireland did wrong things sacrificing taxpayers. Okay, this is from Bloomberg. Apparently, unlike other nations, including the US and Ireland, which injected billions of dollars of capital into their financial institutions to keep them afloat, Iceland placed its biggest lenders in receivership. It chose not to protect creditors of the country's banks, whose assets had ballooned to $209 billion, 11 times gross domestic product. And the Icelandic economy this year is projected to grow 3%. Bloomberg says Iceland's decision to let the banks fail is looking smart and may prove to be a model for others.
Absolutely. That's what we've been saying on the show. Michael Hudson, Dr. Michael Hudson, economist, has been advising countries to close their banks, default on the loans.
But I might add, Max, actually for 150 years, since cotton was at a last all-time high, we have known that if you let the failures fail and you don't rescue them, this is the heart of what capitalism is supposed to be. Not rescue and bail out the crony capitalists, the neoliberal crony capitalists.
Yeah, well, that would be capitalism. But we're not talking about capitalism. Only in Iceland do you find capitalism.
Exactly, but it's not a new model. It's an old model. And Bloomberg is talking about it as if it is a new model. That,
Right.
wow, we're shocked. How is this happening? Wow, maybe we should all study this. But there are thousands of books about this. You could study them. You could have looked at that.
Right, so the idea of free market capitalism and competition has so horribly diluted and ignored during this crisis that the idea of actually having a company or a bank fail is considered new by Bloomberg. This is a new idea.
Yes.
It's called capitalism. It's something brand new. It's crazy, kids. You compete, and if you don't win, you got to be shuffled off and let somebody else try. Wow, what a concept. I wonder if that'll catch on. Well, in Iceland, maybe.
I think it'll catch on before plastic rice does.
Okay, Stacy, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, now, when we come back, a new book about that tyrant, Blythe Masters. I'll be here with the author. Don't go away. Plenty of fireworks coming your way. Okay, we are back. This is the Keiser Report. Every crisis in the world usually can be traced back to a woman. Now, the financial crisis is no exception. Here she is, Blythe Masters. This is the woman who is at the heart of the entire global financial meltdown. She's the power behind Lloyd Blankfein. She's the power behind J.P. Morgan. I've got Pierre Jovanovic. Thanks so much for being on the show. I wanted to jump right in here and talk about Exxon Valdez catastrophe.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about that as it's covered in the book.
Of course, it's covered. The Exxon Valdez was the fact which helped to create the credit default swap because the JP Morgan didn't want to lend to Exxon $5 billion without any guarantees. They were scared that they might go bankrupt.
Okay, so this was after the Exxon Valdez, or
catastrophe.
right? And they couldn't get any money. They couldn't borrow any money. So Blythe Masters essentially sees the inventor of the credit default swap. This is the origin of this, and this is the instrument effectively that has mushroomed to become the key, the financial terrorist weapon of choice.
And the most extraordinary fact in this is that she went to a bank which was invented by the French President François Mitterrand, the BERD, the Banque Européenne. And she convinced the president at the time to swap the default of Exxon, and they signed it. And that was, like commune rente, as we used to say in French, before the revolution, And this is how everything started, because it was easy money. The European Bank said, okay, if Exxon is going to be bankrupt, we will pay the difference. We will pay the $5 billion back to the JP Morgan.
So since then, going forward from that moment of Exxon Valdez, what's the next major milestone in this credit default swap history?
The major was the public introduction of the concept, la théorie, le concept, which was called, again with a French name, bistrot, so like a French cafe, And that was introduced to the public in 1998 in New York. Along with the Madoff, it was a huge party in New York and she distributed her what I called her black book. It was the JP Morgan introduction to credit derivatives, on which she wrote, and her name wasn't there. So this is her book. The black book is, for me, has the same force as the Das Kapital of Karl Marx or the little red book of Mao, because the effect of this just tiny book is absolutely amazing. It's just destroying the whole world, exactly like Das Kapital, give wars all over Europe and
so
Africa.
The Black Book is really the repudiation of capitalism. It's the opposite of capitalism. It's saying we don't want to compete anymore. We just want to create spells from our little black cauldron of derivatives to make us rich and everyone else poor. And now, this little black book, what is exactly Blythe Masters? What is her actual position within JP Morgan? What's her title? How does she fit in the organization?
Now she's the head of commodities. So she gave up on credit default swaps in 2007 on the 15th or 17th of November, and she got her title of head of commodities. And since then, this is extremely interesting because at least what you can see in this book is that what is interesting is not that the fact that she reinvented the credit default swap. What is interesting is that since 2007, she's buying commodities, she's buying agricultural foods, she's buying sugar. In 2007-8, she was already in Brazil, buying everywhere, sugar, pork bellies, live cattle, and everything. And this is why, the prices are going up. And today, you're seeing the results. Because she, with her traders, along with Morgan Stanley, and eventually Little Tiny of Goldman Sachs, they're just putting all the prices up and up and up. And with the quantitative easing of the Bernanke, this is going to explode. So this is she's the mastermind, if I can say, of the new revolution, the worldwide revolution.
Right. So the Wicked Witch, Blythe Masters, and her little black book of spells has concocted financial derivatives to monopolize commodities all over the world, drive the price to unheard of levels, as a way to basically, this is a neo-imperial model, isn't it? Because if you control the food, you control the world. This is a JP Morgan attempting...
But she's English, don't forget that.
She's English?
Yes, she's English.
Oh my God!
So the empire is there.
Right. So, and in your book, you detail here on page 233. Actually, you've got this is kind of an insider information. This is
Yes.
not. This is.
This is the confidential plan of the JP Morgan commodities, and this is exactly what they're going to do and on which places and what they're going to buy. Department by department. So it's extremely interesting. And the very fascinating thing is that I give the manuscript to the printer in beginning of January, and the last words were. We're going to see revolution in Tunisia, in France, in Algeria, in England, everything because of the rises of the agricultural prices. And look what happened. And it's just the beginning. It is just the beginning.
So for 25 years, let's say going back to the Thatcher-Reagan revolution, deregulation, neoliberalization, and the creation of trillions of dollars worth of fiat currency that was used to create all these banking fees up until the point of the crash of 2007, 2008. But now we're in a position with peak credit and peak oil where it's a scramble now of the richest to control what's left of the resources. So so JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and Wall Street, they want to get out of the paper game. They want to get out of the fiat currency game.
Long time ago.
They want to control the stuff now. They want to control the food. They want to control the industrial metals. They want to control the precious metals.
And this decision was made, at least by Blight Masters, at the end of 2006, because they know that the whole model of credit derivatives is going to explode. Look at the JP Morgan. She saved the bank. She saved the JP Morgan bank because her and her team, they had the expertise to see that all this model of credit default swap, all the algorithmic model, were fake, were false. So they didn't went into the toxic in the subprimes. That's why there was a book written about Jimmy Dimon called, The Last Man Standing. Of course, they know. They know that the whole thing is going to explode. So they're not nuts. The JP Morgan Chase didn't went into the subprimes toxic stuff. So they're clean. They come out clean. Now they're the number one.
They allow that stuff pass through them.
Yes.
They make a market, they make a commission, but it all ends up in pension funds and passive funds and places where the savers and the workers of the world have no recourse and they have no ability to fight back. But now, of course, the savers and the workers of the world in Cairo and in Tunis and in Dublin and in Athens are realizing that Blythe Masters, the wicked witch of Wall Street, who has created and concocted the most potent array of financial terrorist derivative products ever conceived, is trying to kill them. So they're fighting back through their proxies, like Mubarak Obama in Egypt, the proxy of Blythe Masters and the evil on Wall Street. They're fighting back. How successful will they be in fighting the army of the liberation against the Blythe Master wicked witch?
But the problem is that they don't have a clue how she's. But the interesting point, when I finished the book, like the idea is the French Revolution was French. Okay. Now we have this whole situation of revolution worldwide. It's not only in France, like 200 years after. This is going to be worldwide, and you have Louis XVI, Louis says, Jamie Dimon, and you have Blythe Masters, Marie Antoinette. The interesting point is that 2 times I compare her to Marie Antoinette because she's extremely dedicated. She wants to be the queen of commodities. So she doesn't care about these people who are, they do not exist for her.
Right.
They're not from her world.
As Marie Antoinette.
Exactly.
So,
acheter de la brioche.
Right, and saying let them eat brioche or let them eat cake. She's saying let them eat plastic rice.
Exactly.
Let them eat derivatives, represent virtual food.
Exactly.
On Farmville.
Exactly.
Goldman Sachs is trying to get into the virtual food business by acquiring Facebook. Of course, they have Farmville. So she's Marie Antoinette, and it is a revolution, and it is caused by higher food prices. And going back to French history, of course, France, Louis XVI, they tried to float the assignat, the currency here, which was backed by commodities and real estate, which collapsed. And the price of food went higher.
This is exactly, history is repeating herself.
But on the global basis.
But now, don't forget, before Louis XVI, there was a fact in the French history was John Law. The English guy again. Maybe she's the reincarnation of John Law.
John Law, the evil spawn of John Law.
He invented, by the way, the fiat money.
Right.
Okay. So and the whole thing collapsed. and there was a mini revolution in Paris. You know, there was like 10 or 15 people dead. You know, Rue Quincampoix, and this led to people were ruined, of course. You know, they lost everything, and now we are going to see exactly the same thing, but you know, just mondialisé, worldwide. You know, this is a worldwide situation. You know, with the television, radio, and everything, internet. So it's on the whole level of the globe.
Is the game truly over for those who are not on the inside of the wicked castle of Blythe and her J.P. Morgan associates? In other words, will the global insurrection, you know, it was successful in the French Revolution. They had the reign of terror. They got rid of a lot of bankers. Yes. Bravo, bravissimo. Good, good, good. But will they succeed this time, or is this the end game now and we're all going to be slaves on J.P. Morgan's plantation?
No, it's the end of the game also for the J.P. Morgan for an extremely simple reason. That there is still 4 million houses you know, to be taken over by the banks. So this is like 860 billions of dollars they are not going to see. So the whole game is dead.
Right.
Period.
So JP Morgan, technically they're insolvent. We know that to be true. They have their balance sheet, they've got $1 trillion in liabilities and no assets at all, except for this woman's wardrobe, which is probably worth a few $100,000.
So she's the best. I mean, seriously, I read the book about Jamie Dimon, The Last Man Standing.
Yeah.
And compare what she has done compared to Jamie Dimon. I mean, she's definitely more interesting and as a banker and what she is doing, because she's a very intellectual. C'est une cérébrale.
Right.
It's very interesting.
Well, Jamie Dimon's a putz. All right, so we gotta go.
She said one thing. I fall in love with credit derivatives.
She's sick. She's sick. She's trying to mate with a credit derivative, and she gave birth to a swap. How sick is that? All right. So anyway, Pierre, we'll have you back in June when the English version is out, and you know, should be a hexa popping here. So thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Pierre. That's right. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.